Welcome to our panel talking about queer joy in gaming. Gayming LIVE is presented by Healthysexual from Gilead Sciences, and the Community Zone is sponsored by Remag, a new place to connect with gamers in your community. Thank you to both of them for their support in making this happen. First, let we start with an introduction about who we are and why are we here. Hi, I am Monica Fan. I am a game designer working at Pipeworks. I do code development for indie and AAA studio projects. I experiencing system and gameplay design for existing IP and franchise. So next, can we have Ren to introduce himself?
Hi, I'm Ren. I am a game designer at Shell Games right now. I'm mostly working in VR, which is really cool. But outside of that, I'm also working as a programmer on Validate Game.
Radiant, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Radiant G, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I am the site lead for the worker-run, writer-led games journalism website, Press Space to Jump, and I am also working on a game with the lovely Monica called Himbo Hunter.
Yeah, next we have Zach.
Hey, I'm Zach. I am a senior VR designer working at Brave. And yeah.
Aquamarine.
Hi, I'm Aqua. They, them. I'm an independent narrative designer working on 2 undisclosed projects at the moment.
Thank you so much for coming to this panel. And before further ado, let's go to our first question. What are some of the most meaningful moments of queer joy in video game that you have experienced? Aqua, would you like to go first?
Yeah, for sure. So in 2020, I was in the very bizarre position of coming out in the middle of the pandemic. And Monster Camp was my first experience in a game with like a non-binary character that was both like out. The story wasn't about their like struggle specifically. They were just like vibing, which I loved. And it was the first time I could romance a non-binary character. So I remember playing that game like alone in the early months of the pandemic as my egg finally came open. And yeah, meeting Milo Belladonna and just getting a chance to date a character that like kind of shared my nascent identity was so joyful and surprising and helped me get through those years too. Yeah, it was really legit. Yeah.
Thank you. And also, sorry about my cat who decided to join our discussion last minute.
Don't apologize for the cat.
Ren, would you like to talk about your experience with Validate, which is also the game you worked on?
Yes, I did work on it. But I think for anyone who's played Volume 1, which you totally should, but the one character you can play as Malik, I feel like I always talk about him, but I kind of love him even though he sucks. No major spoilers for anything, but the journey he goes on as you play is about like, him figuring out his sexuality. And well, he's super messy and he has no idea what he's doing. And he makes so many mistakes. By the end, you're able to have him be super happy in his sexuality and, actually explore that. And I think I just really love it because it's not a, I guess, quote unquote, good queer story. Like it's well written and it's realistic, but he's real messy and he makes a lot of problems as he's figuring himself out. And I just really love that we're able to have like messy gays, because I feel like we are always restrained to make sure that like you have to have the to the T good queer story. And I really love when people can be queer and messy.
Oh, absolutely. It feels definitely more real as someone who's also queer and very messy. Radiant, please talk about your experience with this wonderful game called Dream Daddy.
Okay. I know it's a stereotype, but I love Dream Daddy, and there are so many characters in it. But with Dream Daddy, for me, it's one of those things where no matter how many times I open up the game, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna romance someone new today, and then I just romance Damien Bloodmarch again because I love him so much. Like when I saw him, I was just like, oh, he's the best. He's goth dad. I love everything about this. He likes Hot Topic. This man is me. And then I found out that he like shipped BL and had fan fiction in his room, and I was like, oh, this man is me. And then I found out he was transgender, and I'm like, oh shit. I don't know if we're allowed to swear. Maybe we aren't. But it was just like, it was that moment, that moment of like, oh wow, like this character, I haven't seen a character like this in games before, and it meant so much. Like, oh, it's just such a good character, and I love Damien, and like, thank you so much to the people who made Dream Daddy for bringing this wonderful man into the world.
Yes, absolutely. Dream Daddy is also one of my favorite games. And next slides, as you may notice, we're not just people who love playing game, we're also game dev, and we would like to talk about inclusive design and game development, and as queer person who works in the game. So the next question is, what makes queer inclusive character customization system in your experience, and what games does this well, or what game does this not so well? First of all, I want to just talk about, I've been playing Starfield a lot, and that game has, it's not a perfect game, it has a lot of flaws, but one thing that makes me really, really happy as someone who often go by they, them pronoun is in real life, we have a lot of experience where you have to correct people about pronouns. You have to, when you meet someone for the first time, you have to let them know about your pronoun, which is a very normal experience for any like queer and trans inclusive person. The thing about Starfield is once you set up your pronoun in the beginning, you can go to everywhere in the universe, everyone in the system, and everyone will address you with the right pronoun. It may not be the most realistic design, but it definitely is very joyful and makes me feel really good about who I am. So, and that is just my experience with like inclusive character design that actually brings a lot of joy. Zach, would you like to talk about your experience with Neopets?
Yeah, so I guess like this is a little bit different from what most people would typically think of like character customization. But Neopets was really awesome for the fact that on your profile page and on your pets pages, you could entirely customize the entire thing. You could choose to hide all of it. You could choose to show all of it. You could. It basically gave you control over all of the HTML and CSS. So basically, it was ultimate customization of it being literally anything that you wanted. And Neopets was actually one of the first places where I learned how to design things and learned about how do I want to present myself. And that was a pretty kind of formative experience growing up of just being able to understand that like everything can be customized. Like everything that people see and understand about me can be customized. And I have the ability to choose and change things. And yeah, that was really awesome for me. So I guess it's a lot of it was just about like the design of the site and just what it gave you access to. Yeah, I love Neopets.
Yeah, it's definitely a great design for like player agency, especially for a game that is so from like such an early day where these type of like discussion was not like necessarily a very prominent discussion.
Yeah, and you can actually see like the new version of this in things like VR chat, where because there's so much customization, anyone can be whatever they want. There's a big reason why there's a lot of like trans representations in the VR chat.
Yes,
we have the freedom to do that.
Yes, and we'll get into that more very soon.
Yeah.
Radiant, have you been playing the new Street Fighter game?
Yes, I have, and let me tell you, it is fantastic. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the character customization in Street Fighter 6 because it is above and beyond, like in terms of body types and faces and all that. Nothing is gender locked. You can I came from Soul Calibur series, which like is great in customization, but you cannot have a guy that's like not this super beefy dude. And in Street Fighter 6, you can have your male characters be just as like live and effeminate as your female characters. And being able to make a feminine man, a beautiful femboy baby boy, as I call him. I like literally that's the what I named my character. It was so freeing and it was so much fun. And I feel like I talk about him at every panel now that I get the chance. But it was just such a nice experience to be able to create a character to play as in a game and like explore this RPG world, which like there's a whole single player in the new one, as a character that I felt represented me, which I don't often get. So like it was very nice.
Yes. And as Zach has already like mentioned earlier, for our next slide, we're gonna talk about so what does being able to roleplay your real life identity means to you, and how can this ability helps player. Please talk about this both from your experience as a queer person and as well as a game developer. Zach, would you like to go first?
Yeah, so I put on RuneScape here because RuneScape was one of the first places I actually went by the name Zach. So that's where I picked my name. Really off the cuff. I was like, what sounds like a cool dude name? And I was like, Zach. So like for me, being able to play RuneScape and kind of have that identity and have that be the only thing that people really knew about me kind of going in was super powerful for me growing up, just having that space that I could just be whoever I wanted to be. It was just like a way to explore in a way that was like lower risk. So yeah, I think people can definitely explore different things without having to commit to anything in particular. Everything is changeable, everything is mutable. So I think it's pretty powerful for queer folks.
Absolutely. And Radiant, we've already talked a lot off the screen about how much you love Baldur's Gate.
Oh boy, do I love Baldur's Gate. Yeah, so for me, like as someone who is bi, like being able to play a game that is equal opportunity in the relationships that you have is very, very nice, because I feel like a lot of games are geared towards like either people who are attracted to women or people who are attracted to men, and having like a AAA game like Baldur's Gate be like, no, like we're here for everybody. It was just really nice. Like I could go on forever about how much I love Astarion, Lae'zel, Halsin, like you name it. There's so many choices, and you know, you don't have to be like, oh, every single time I play, I'm going to be attracted to a woman or a man. Like you could switch it up. There's so many different ways to do it. So I think it's a great way for people to also like explore their sexualities. Like I know people who are like, I've never been attracted to a man before, but that Astarion though.
Yes, I added Bemba as the last minute like choice, mostly because it was the first time I was able to roleplay as a first generation immigrant. I feel like that is a very interesting experience, and it's like even though the character I play does not 100% match my real life character, there's so many like experience or interactivity you play through the game that is really refreshing because there's just not a lot of game portray like immigration, like the experience of being like immigrants. Yes.
I think like one of the important things is like having the ability to show up in ways that you may not be able to do it like in your personal, real day-to-day life. Kind of having that freedom to share and talk about that. Yeah, I think that's really, really important, especially for folks who are queer, where sometimes it like a lot of the times it's like you just want to be able to express it even in these small ways, and it can help a lot just mentally. Like little safe spaces.
Yes, absolutely. I used to design game for nonprofit organization where we use video game as a tool to open up conversation, and I have witnessed firsthand how powerful video game can be as like a way to connect people and as a way to open up conversation about some often difficult topic. And for the next slides, we're going to talk about our experience as game developer. How has your queer identity impact your decision making as a game developer? And how do you advocate for change with coworkers who don't necessarily share your identity? Agua, would you like to talk about your experience?
Yeah, so I have multiple invisible non-disclosed games as example here, so I'm going to be as specific / vague as I can be. But like, you know, we've already talked a lot about like the importance of being able to like both experiment and see ourselves as we are or want to be in games. And I think in terms of a dev, it kind of affects every piece of the process. Like for me, not just being like, oh, I want more like non-monogamous relationships, more non-binary characters, more trans characters, everything, but also like it also affects the way I think about like queering story structure, even like, you know, not having things play out linearly because a lot of us don't go through like the same like linear, like sort of top down cishet ideas of how time works in your life. The whole like I grew up with a lot of the pressure to be like, you're gonna go to school, get a job, get married, blah 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 blah. And we don't like no one, even just outside of the US, like and within the US, this isn't like as normal as it's pitched. But showcasing that in games, giving people the opportunity to experience like time in different ways as well as be themselves, has really been something I'm like always on the lookout for. It definitely in the early brainstorming sessions, I'm like very like, but why though? It's become like a meme in some circles with me. Yeah. To just throw in a little thing about advocating, like a lot of it so far has honestly just been like trying to stick my neck out for folks when like pronouns aren't being used, but also pitching those different, maybe like different structures and more accessible controllers as well. Yeah.
Yes, and Zach. Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, I just caught that. Yeah, so one of the things for me, so I worked on Supernatural, which is a VR fitness game. One of the things to me was also being able to kind of acknowledge that people are at different stages, and like fitness is one of those things which can be a very touchy topic for a lot of people. So like kind of during the process for a long time, I was like a really strong advocate for like really thinking about like who are the users who are going to most benefit from this and how are we talking to them. Doing things like, why do we have to ask for gender? Why do we have to ask for weight? Like all of those things don't really impact their kind of ability inside of the game itself to a certain extent. So why do we need to ask these things? why can't we just like make it inclusive from the start and make sure that it like can speak to folks from all different identities? And for me, that was pretty powerful, especially for trans folks. I actually really pushed heavily to do a post, I think it was Trans Day of Visibility, where I was like, let's tell people what makes things, like what makes the game good for folks who are trans. And some of those things are like, in VR, you don't have to see your body. You can feel a connection with your body without having to see it, which for folks who go through dysphoria is like really powerful. A lot of trans folks really struggle with things like fitness because of that. So we did a whole post about that. And yeah, so advocating for some design things and also advocating for users is really important to me.
Yes, Zach did a very fascinating post about trans identity and in VR space. If anyone who's interested, I highly recommend you check it out. It's very, very fascinating. Ren, please talk about your experience in Validate and A Normal Nos Phone. Also, Cat Scratch Play in the chat. Yes, you should definitely be playing Validate.
Yeah, so just to talk about A Normal Nos Phone first, I did not work on this, but I played it for the first time a long time ago, and I highly recommend everyone to play it. It is a trans story that came out, I don't know what year, but it was like a while ago, and it still holds up as like such a great story. Recently, at my job, we do game playthroughs and then like talk about them. And this was like one of the first games we played. And playing this with my coworkers was so interesting, especially like knowing how it ends and like what the story is as a trans story, and watching them like not pick up on the subtle clues that the story drops that I feel like a lot of us here might pick up on. It was just really eye-opening and very interesting. I'm very lucky to work at a very inclusive place. But it was just so, I don't know if it was like weird for them to like play it with a like non-binary person with them being cis, just because of how the story gets like a little uncomfortable in places for some people. And it's just the way they talk about it afterward with like this like, even though it's a very happy story, this like almost somber mood to it just because of a little bit of the uncomfortable bits in the middle. But like playing that was just a really eye-opening experience for me. I don't think I was out at the time when that happened, but it was like, I think one of the first or one of the few trans stories I had played at the time. So it was really like, oh, look at that. And then working on Validate was another eye-opening experience, even though I only started a few years ago. Just because like prior to this, inclusivity in both like racial and queerness, that like intersectionality was something that I really wanted to advocate for, and I wanted to put in the games I make, but you know, it's very hard to do that, especially when, you know, I'm not every identity out there. So being able to work on this game that had a very diverse, even just the people I'm working with, and in addition to the characters that you're playing as, and like reading those stories, really like solidified in my own like personal game making of the kind of stories like I want to tell, and like the type of games that I want to be able to make in the future. Like I want to put more brown people in games. I want to put more messy queer people in games. I really love how some of our characters use multiple pronouns, just like the people on this panel, and how the game was able to seamlessly, you know, switch between those two pronouns, which is a thing that's, you know, very hard to do in real life, even if you know that person uses multiple pronouns and things like that. So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to say, as a queer person who used to make games that makes people feel a little bit uncomfortable, I think that uncomfortable experience is, first of all, very it's totally okay. That's part of the reason we make games, is if you want to challenge people's existing viewpoints, sometimes it's necessary to make them a little bit uncomfortable. But also, like, as a queer person, we experience a lot of time feel uncomfortable among straight people's, like, we have to survive in that space. So I don't feel too bad if I make people a little bit uncomfortable, and I think it's a good space to be like being uncomfortable and being open to see things from different viewpoints. So definitely, if you're a queer game dev, do not be afraid of making people feel uncomfortable. And that's the place we like sometimes see what do you need to be to make a change.
Monica's like, they gotta suffer too. Just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's if you want to feel relatable and feel what it's like to be a queer person in straight person space, a little bit uncomfortable is not that far off. Yeah, for the next slides, we're gonna talk about the features we want to see more in game. Radiant, would you like to talk about the features you would like to see more in video games?
Yes, so I have two major ones, and I'm going to be going into a little bit of detail here. So first of all, I was the one who chose to put Splatoon on this slide because I had played a little bit of the first one, but I didn't get really into it until Splatoon 3 when they, yes, removed gender lock. You could have different hairstyles, you could put eyelashes on whoever, and that is enough to get me to get a game. As I said earlier with Street Fighter 6, them not having gender lock and having such customization options was part of the reason I got the game. It's why I bought The Sims, because I bought it when that update came out. Being able to put makeup on male characters in Pokemon games has been amazing as well. Just anything that could be gender locked, just get rid of it. Everybody can wear everything. I also prefer if you can choose your pronouns separate from your body type, separate from the clothes that you like to wear. Because I feel like there's so many games that will still tie those things together, but it's happening less and less and less. There's a few things that could be done better with regards to this in Baldur's Gate 3, but it's still better than fantasy games 10 years ago by far. We've made it a long way. So if anybody out there is listening about that they might be thinking about making a game, just get rid of gender lock. If it takes a little bit of extra time to model the clothing to a couple different body types, it's worth it. So many more people are going to see themselves in that game. So go for it. That is like my number one. Now, my number two is about how sexuality is depicted in games. For example, you might not or may know the term player sexual. Player sexual is basically that the characters in the game don't necessarily have canon sexualities, or maybe they have preferences outside of the player, but no matter what, they're always going to be into whatever gender the player is. And there's some talk out there about how this isn't real representation, but I would say that it is the best representation I have. So when I say this, I mean that when it comes to having a strict, oh, this character is gay, this character is lesbian, like think Dragon Age has that in some of their games. You don't take into account the complexity of gender and transness when you have these stark identities on the screen. So maybe I selected male at the start screen, but maybe I'm playing a very effeminate character, a very gender non-conforming character, a character who, if they were a real person, would be comfortable dating a lesbian. But the game doesn't let you date them because you checked off male as the closest thing to represent that gender in the game. Yeah. Having player sexual characters, gets rid of that. But I think that that's the end all be all? No, there's some problems with player sexuality as well. But being able to romance who you want and identify how you want, that's the closest we have to it right now. And I'm interested to see where that can go in the future.
It's definitely a very interesting conversation, because as someone who does system design for a living, there is always this contradiction between the complexity of being a real human in real life versus the necessity of having a clear system for a lot of gameplay loop to works. And I agree with you, like when the gameplay system is not enough to like represent the complexity of real life, sometimes it's a better choice to just let it open and give player the choice, the freedom to do what they want, rather than trying to use system preventing, like recreate the kind of limiting experience queer people already experience in real life. Also, like I totally agree with the gender lock clothing stuff. As someone who wear clothes for both gender, I never have clothes that reject to be worn just because my body does not fit how the clothes is designed. I think it is getting better. I hope it is getting better, but we definitely have a long way to go. Aqua, would you like to talk about your experience with Hades?
Yeah, just wanted to add on to the gender lock before that. I'm imagining going into a Goodwill and like going from one side to the other. A lot of the Goodwills here have like, they're massive, yet somehow there's always this like long line where one side is marked as male and the other as female, which is BS. And I'm just imagining like that working like one of these gender lock games where I try and go from one side to the other and there's an invisible wall. Just being like, who put an invisible wall in this Goodwill? This is horribly programmed. No, none of that. Yeah, Hades goes into one of the things that I want to see. Some things I want to see more of in games, and some things that I wish there were more of. The wishing is very few games have this, but I wish that like I've seen this only in one game, where like if you have romances, there have been moments I've had, and I know friends have had, where you're trying to date a character, and just because of the way the writing is, or because you're a completionist with the dialogue, you end up. This can go two ways. You can either end up like unintentionally hitting on a character you're not interested in, or even the characters you are like into. I think it'd be really cool in both cases if games made a very standard practice of having like moments where the game pauses to, one, give you a chance to opt out, and two, even more importantly, like give emphatic, enthusiastic consent, like with yes. I don't think it would drag the writing down at all. And I see it as a feature personally, because I think for a lot of people, based on what can be triggering in my own life and friends of mine, it's just really good to know that even in this fantasy world where you're about to fight off a bunch of like virus-laden orcs or something, that everyone here is still very well educated in consent. I need that in all my games. I've literally only seen it in one like not safe for work game that's got like a very small audience, and I'm like, are you kidding? This is the only place I've seen this. Like in this game, you always have to give consent. Love it. Yeah, and also with Hades, like stumbling upon a game that their narrative design allowed for non-monogamous and polyamorous relationships, but also like discussed that, gave you the option to like literally at one point, I think, like my messiness, of course I'm romancing everyone that I'm interested in. And one of the characters brings up like, I think Zagreus brings up like, hey, is this okay? I kind of liked the option that the game was like, so are you like canonically as the player trying to be poly, or are you cheating on one of these characters? Like, tell us, the game, which one you're doing so we can change the narrative. And I was like, thanks for acknowledging that and just not assuming that I'm the kind of person who just wants to cheat on people, because that happens in so many games. Oh my God. Where they just lock you into monogamy. That's another feature. And then like one last thing that, Monica, I think you'll be touching a lot more on, so I don't want to go too much into, but like having more community-based storytelling as well as like sociological storytelling, where the characters are not just like an individualized hero who's going to solve everything because of what's within, but that like their character, their messy queerness is based on like the world you've built, the systems they're in. Like, even if it's like a sci-fi game, there are still systems around you that reflect what's in real life. Definitely affects us as queer people and with any of our intersectional identities. So that's maybe not so much like a programmable feature, but I see it as like a day one design choice that I really want to see in more games. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Just a quick reminder, we're gonna have a Q&A after this talk. So if you have any questions, please do post them in chat and we will try to do our best to answer. Yes, so I want to talk about my experience with I Was a Teenager Exocolonist. As Agua has said, one thing is really good is it is a game about what happened when you try to build a community from scratch. And I think this, like, the reason I love this game so much is because it has a perfect balance in the way that you can romance everyone you want, but your character is not going to change themselves into like having you be the center of their world. I don't know if it makes sense. Like, I'm from the early days where I used to play a lot of otome games, visual novels in my teenage year, and one common trope about those type of game is everyone just you are the center of the universe, and everyone orient what they do based on like what's best for you. And on one hand, like it does fulfill certain fantasy, but the more I learn about like boundaries and healthy relationship, and I started to realize it's not, first of all, it's not very realistic, but secondly, it's sending a very toxic message about like, oh, if someone doesn't orient their whole life around you, maybe they don't love you enough. And I Was a Teenager Exocolonist has this interesting that every character, they have their own story, they have their own personality, they have their very strong boundaries about what they do or do not want to do, but that does not stop you from being able to romance them. Another thing I really love about this I Was a Teenager Exocolonist, as someone like with PTSD, content warning is always a very tricky point in the way that I understand a lot of people be like, oh, there's so many content warning, I get spoiled. Versus for me, as someone with PTSD, I need to know every single, like, I need to know, like, if I can play the game ahead of time before it's too late. And one thing, like, this game did very well is instead of, like, in the beginning of the game, they give you a long paragraph of, like, 100 bullet points of things may happen. Counter warning is a tab you can enter in the main page. And when you enter, they have list of potential, like, trigger in the game. And if only you are interested in knowing more about it, you can click into it and it will tell you what's happening. But if you do not, like, if you think this is not something that matters to you, or if like you don't want to know that much, you don't have to click into it, so you will not get spoiled. But for us who like use like trigger warning a lot, like I really appreciate the ability to like having a list of potential trigger and trying to understand what are the things I'm signing up into. But also on the other hand, it becomes a lot less overwhelming because it's always really scary when game give you a paragraph and be like, here's all the stuff you can either say yes or you can say no. And I had to like spend the 2 minutes before the game to try to understand everything like that potentially may or may not happen in the game. So like I think it's a very smart way to do content warning, and it doesn't take that much lifting. So hopefully more game will do that in the future. And for the next slides is a fun one. We're gonna talk about our favorite video game character and the favorite character you've romanced. Let's go one by one. Ren, would you like to go first?
Sure. So when we were making this, my brain immediately went blank, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I've never romanced a character in my entire life. But for here, I put Yolanda again from Validate, because if you granted, we don't get to see a whole lot of her, but if you play her routes, she is just the most perfect woman I've ever met. She's so cute. She's like, her little hat changes emotions with her emotions. She writes poetry. Like, she's just perfect, and I don't think I've ever met a more perfect character in my entire life.
Yay. Radiant.
Okay, so I know I already talked about him, but I can never talk too much about Damien Bloodmarch. He was actually the second character that I romanced in the game, and then the only one that I romanced after that. He's just a wonderful, layered human being, and I'm not gonna like spoil anything, but like the more you get to know him, the more layers you realize he has, and he's a wonderful human being, and I would like to gently smooch him. That's all.
Yes. Zach, what about you?
Yeah, so I have two things. One, which is Stray Gods, in which I mentioned in our private chat. I tried to romance everybody, and then in my first playthrough didn't romance anybody at the end because I apparently picked poorly. And my other one is this character in blue in the center here. His name's Alti Alazal from a honestly terrible fighting game on the PS1 called Evil Zone. But he was one of like my first video game, I guess, crushes, which looking at him, it's kind of obvious a little bit why. But yeah, wanted to be him, and also he's great.
Yeah, I think that's the best kind of like video game character is you both want to be him, but also you want to be with him.
Yes.
Like it doesn't happen a lot, but whenever it happens, that's definitely a very memorable experience. Aqua, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Same energy, same mood. Want to be with and be. I already mentioned Milo being that was like a really big moment for me, being able to date a non-binary character. I love that we also have two characters in here that have like color changing based on mood. IRL, I've been chasing objects like that for a long time. Yeah, but just the same thing of like yeah, being able to both see yourself and see someone that is like as messy as they are kind feels so wonderful to see in a game. I really should like stop being afraid of just hitting up the writer and being like, I like this character, thank you. I've been like drafting and deleting that email for a year. Yeah, vibes.
Sounds like you're gonna do it. I can almost guarantee the writer will be very happy to receive an email like that.
I know I would. Oh my god.
So yes, that's it for our regular scheduled content. And if you are interested to know more of us and to know what we do in our real life, you can find us in our social media. Let's go to Q&A next. Let me see if there's any Q&A. If you have any question, please put it in the slides. But otherwise, we can go to the bonus slides.
Yes, I think we talked about gender lock, but there's definitely time to talk about it more.
Yeah. How does item class affect Lockio experience? I have this very Radiant has definitely like heard me talk about this before. Is there's one thing is when video game gender lock you. There's another thing that really gets to me is when video game put queer content behind a paywall. Like I think they stopped doing it as much, but back in the day, it's very common where like your default character or your free base game character is like a cisgender straight male. And if you want to add color, which if you know anything about me, I love color, I love cats, I love cute stuff. Anything you want to do, you have to pay money. And it feels very wrong, and it feels very like I'm being punished for my queerness because I have to pay extra money to make my character the way I want versus a lot of cis male straight male friends who can just have the character they want without paying extra cents. To me, it's not only is very upsetting and like bad design, but also feels very unfair and punishing for the queerness. And if any of like people who are watching are planning to do this with their game, please don't. And lastly, if you can find us in our social. These are the space. Some of us are still on Twitter for the foreseeable future until what's the next upcoming one, but these are the handles you can follow us. And thank you for watching this panel. Thank you for Gayming Live for having us. Thank you for Remake for sponsoring this session. If you haven't heard, anyone who signed up to Remake and joined the gaming community before the end of October is in with the chance of winning an Xbox Series X. Scan the QR code below to join. To check out what else has happened across Gayming Live, visit gamingnmag.com/live and follow at gamingnmag on all socials. Thank you so much.